Stick with looking for value for money. Stick with the job that we hired you for. Don't start pretending you're a doctor or a health professional, because I can tell you, you aren't.
Good evening. That was an angry Doug Ford lashing out at Ontario's Auditor General. He went on an unprecedented attack after she released a damning report on the government's pandemic response. It calls the province's top doctors' power into question and paints a picture of confusion. Here is what has the Premier so angry.
Overall, we found that Ontario's response to COVID-19 in the winter and spring of 2020 was slower and more reactive relative to other provinces.
The report finds delays, conflicts, and confusion in decision-making and says the government showed a lack of communication and mixed messaging during the pandemic. It also suggests Dr. Williams, the province's chief medical officer of health, who has faced criticism during the pandemic, did not fully exercise his powers. The Premier has repeatedly said he follows the doctor's advice and has asked him to postpone his retirement until September. This report clearly got under Doug Ford's skin.
I'm really glad the Auditor General just got a health degree and become a doctor over the last year or so.
The opposition sees it differently.
The Premier chose to act, ignoring the advice of public health officials in this province.
Doug Ford has stood at a podium every day since March and effectively lied about who he's listening to.
Other findings in the report: Ontario's command structure, which has 500 people at the table, became cumbersome and not dominated by public health expertise. And Public Health Ontario played a diminished role in the provincial response. That had the health minister also firing back.
Today's Auditor General's report is a disappointment, and in many respects, a mischaracterization.
Governments rarely like Auditor General reports. However, this kind of pushback is unheard of. But this is a government that initially enjoyed public support and is now facing public fatigue and frustration. Bonnie Lysyk also found the Ford government acted slower than BC to protect residents in long-term care. The report says by April 30th, BC had 69 deaths versus Ontario's 628. It means Ontario had 10 times the death, with only 3 times the number of residents, putting another minister on the defensive.
We're in a 100-year global pandemic that is affecting the entire world. We must not lose context of that.
The list of issues goes on. The Auditor General also found the province waited too long to ramp up testing. But she also concludes the Liberals bear some blame for the lack of preparedness. The pandemic response plan hadn't been updated since 2013. The Liberals were in power until 2017. And then in the midst of all that to digest today, the government issued guidelines for the holidays, and it's no surprise it's telling people to only celebrate with members of their household. Now, over to